I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Lee Barrett. Lee is the CEO and publisher of Canada Football Chat, CFC. He's also been a contributor to TSN, and he is a recruiting expert. Today, I want to find out more about CFC, how it started, and the importance to athletes and coaches alike. Join me in my conversation today with Lee Barrett. I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Lee Barrett. Good day, fine sir.
Hey, Brian, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for coming on here, doing this with me. Would you start off by just telling us what industry you're in, maybe in a couple of positions that you have, and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so currently I'm a business owner, two businesses, one that's been in operation for about 11 years now. So it was a right from the ground pure entrepreneurial play where we started it's called CanadaFootballChat.com. So its focus is Canadian football, which is very similar to American football. However, there's some subtle differences in the rules between American football and Canadian football. Our focus is on high school and the high school recruits. So we would have a kind of a media portion of the website, and then we have an events portion. Our media includes a membership, which players we rank a bunch of the prospects from across Canada. We rank. We also rank the top high school teams when we're playing football during the season. And then as far as the events, we've got a bunch of prospect-oriented events, of course, with our big crown jewel being a game on TSN. So that would be like Canada's version of ESPN. And we produced that for the first time in 2019. First ever prospect game or any pre-university game ever broadcast on a national broadcaster in Canada. So it was a big deal. And from that game, there's already been about 15 kids who got NCAA scholarships since playing in that game. So it's and since we've been doing the website, kids from Canada getting NCAA scholarships has increased about 150% since we started ranking them back in 2013. The other thing that came out of kind of obviously learning all this knowledge with regards to the CFC, myself and a partner, a former teammate of mine in university football, we started a preparatory school. So it's an American high school football team, but it's actually located in Canada in the Greater Toronto area. And so what we do is we'll play some of the top high school teams in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and we usually have an annual trip that we go down to Florida to play IMG Academy, which is one of the best programs in the country. And so we've been doing that for 5 years. Within the first 4 years, we had 30 kids get NCAA scholarships, and which is just unheard of in Canada. And it's a total new a new venture in such that it's just really very unique opportunity for Canadians. Instead of having to go to the States in high school, they could stay in Canada and achieve those goals of getting that NCAA scholarship. So we partner with the school, Clarkson Secondary School, which is in Mississauga. And so those two things, keep me busy and they're enjoyable. They're in football. It just, obviously I have a passion for football, but I've, I think those businesses have we've built them from a business standpoint. You got to have a business focus, or they're not going to thrive like they have. So I think the business acumen, the football acumen combined, and most importantly, surrounding ourselves with good people. So we have great staff in both programs that run it. I oversee them, but those are the people that are doing the hard work, and so the staff's done an outstanding job. As far as my background.
So yeah, sorry, Lee, just knowing that you're the CEO and that you're doing well with CFC and how things are coming together. And I know even from Acadia Connection, you have Clint Utley, Sonny
Yep.
Wolf, and Elliot Richardson on your staff as well, people of whom I know because I went to Acadia as well. And even as that, it brings me up. I went there in 96. I tried out for the team, and you guys were monsters to me, just great athletes. I got cut, but I have no resentment because eventually I did go back and try out and make the team. But just knowing that you, and you even mentioned your partner that you're working with, that you guys were just the giants to us as we came up through the ranks. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. But Knowing this and getting a better understanding of you, can you go back a little bit? And what would have been your very first job, even as a teenager?
Oof, very first job as a
Yeah.
teenager. I think.
Even
Well, I
if it didn't
definitely,
make any money, if you're mowing lawns or shoveling snow, just to
yeah,
especially think of recruits
for
who
sure.
are getting into these programs and wondering what hard work looks like to get
Yeah,
someone where they are.
for sure. So going back to my youth, I definitely remember doing lemonade stands or, selling, raffling off prizes based on how many jujubes were in a bottle. So I definitely did those little back in the day side hustles as a young kid. Did the paper routes, did those. I think my first kind of more formalized job would have been a dishwasher. So in a restaurant, I did the dishwasher. I was probably 15 or so. Did some summer camps, like YMCA kind of affiliated camps. So I did those as well. Um,
What would have been your motivation, even like lemonade stands, raffling? What was your motivation to get out and to make some money or just to be entrepreneurial?
yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's a long time ago. So I think it's just
It's not that long ago. Come on, Lee.
well, it's long enough to not remember maybe the specific
Yeah,
motivation
yeah,
other
yeah.
than just it was it's seemed like the right thing to do. Just set up a table on the side of the road in Dakin Crescent in Cambridge, Ontario, and I think the community was had a bunch of younger kids in the community, so I think that there was a few of us that were a little more entrepreneurial, so we were just thinking of ways to make a little bit of money, and I'm sure that I think just being creative back, I've always been a little creative when it comes to the entrepreneurial venture. So I think that's my first creative venture was the not the lemonade stands and creative, but raffling
Yeah,
off
yeah.
a raffle based on how many jujubes are in
Well,
a
even
jar.
getting a job, right, is creative in itself, especially as a, preteen or something. It
Yeah,
is creative to get out there and where other kids could be doing other things, you're taking that initiative, you're taking
yeah.
that step to do so. And what about high school? Did you have a particular job or was that the dishwashing job carrying through? And then what were you starting to think about your education as you went to university?
Yes, my parents, they were how they kind of approach things. The summer was a time to get a job, but if I had extracurricular activities during the school year, like sports, then they didn't force me or encourage me to get a job. So as long as I was active, like if I didn't play sports, they would have encouraged or
Hmm.
forced me or whatever to get a job. So in my high school days, more or less it was sports during the year, and then in the summers, then yeah, I'd have to get a job. So that's when I would do the dishwashing or the summer camps in the high school. So um, and I think a lot of my focus in the high school and the university years were on sports. So I
When did you
probably,
start playing football, seeing that we're doing this parallel with one another?
yeah, so I would have my first started playing tackle football in grade 8. We used to play
Yeah.
football on the streets
Hmm.
where I grew up before that, but started playing tackle football in grade 8.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when you started to think about university, what was on your mind for a career, or what were you starting to think? Was that even on your radar?
Yeah, I think I just back my initial plans were to be a high school phys ed teacher, just again because I think I enjoyed sports high school and I enjoyed phys ed class, and probably looked up to some of my phys ed teachers. But then when I got in university, that changed. But that was my first inspiration, and to do that coming out of high school. So I went into Acadia with the phys ed, getting into the phys ed program, which at that time was a concurrent education program, meaning you could get an education degree concurrently with your physical education degree. So that was the initial motivation, but
Hmm.
I've zigged and zagged many times since then, or since university, and I'm glad I didn't go into that profession because it would have been, knowing I'm an entrepreneur, really, that would have stifled me for sure.
Knowing, speaking of zigging and zagging, as a slot back, you would have done lots of that. You had a pretty successful career in university. You made the all-decade team
Yep.
from the 1990s. Can you speak of your football career, especially thinking of students, how they may approach it, what's a good way to approach it, and how they can look forward to however life zigs and zags for them?
Yeah, I think, looking at it from a vantage of perspective, I'm obviously glad that I embarked on a sports career that was concurrent with school. I think that helped. And it's one of the reasons that I'm involved with the sports school program now, because I really think it helps, especially a young male to, while you're not maybe motivated with school as much as the sports, it helps you continue to be interested and motivated in school because it's kind of that carrot.
Yeah.
So I think from that standpoint, I'm glad because I think my school, I've got a couple undergraduate degrees and MBA now, but I don't think I hit my stride until my third year university. I think I was just coasting, right? But I wouldn't have had the opportunity probably unless I had that sports background. And again, fortunate that the sports was connected to a school, right? Not a community program, connected to a school, because it really, not that I wouldn't have went to university, but I don't think I would have had the exact same path. So I think from that standpoint, and the sports just complemented the school and such that you develop skills that in sports that you wouldn't develop in a school. So, the teamwork, especially in a sport that has so many players in it, like football, you learn the different dynamics of teamwork, obviously competitiveness, discipline, self-discipline, and some of those things you can get to a certain extent in school and maybe other settings, but it's really accelerated when you're in a hyper competitive atmosphere. And you tend to, a lot of those learnings get accelerated because of the pressure, the intensity, the competition, and what you're trying to do, and the sport itself. It's a dangerous sport, so you have to rely on other people to do what they're supposed to do, or it's not going to feel really good. So I think from looking back to it, I'm glad that I did play the sports, and it really helped me academically, because as much to just keep me in the academic pathway to until I hit my stride academically. I hit my stride academically in my third year university, but and I was a decent football player, but I probably, I had a great last of my 11 years. I had a great 11th year. The other years, were cumulatively that helped me get to that point. But so you never know. It's just like a business, right? I mean, CFC, for instance,
Actually, Lee, I was just going to say to you, from as you graduated, how did you find yourself into CFC, and how did that start to begin?
Yeah, so after my graduation, I remained at Acadia, and I coached, and I did another degree. So for the first 4 or 5 years after my initial undergraduate, I coached at football. And then, it's not a profession or anything. Like in Canada, you get a little bit of money, and unless you're the head coach, you're not making a livable wage. So then after that, I got into a business. It was like a retail business with some friends. I did that for 4 or 5 years. It was like a supplement store, and that was a good education. That was my first business after school, and it gave me a good framework and perspective on running your own business. I didn't create it, but I ended up running it. And then after that, it wasn't a great business, so we just shut it down after that 5th year. And then after that, I did a few other things. I worked for a construction company I was a general manager. So I was doing the marketing, the bookkeeping, again, learning a lot of great skills, working for an entrepreneur. There was like 10, 15 people in the company, did that for 3 years. And then I got into financial planning. I did that for 4 years, worked for a firm in Ottawa and a firm in Toronto, brokerage in Toronto, insurance company in Ottawa, and had some great training, some great sales training. And then, and then after I moved to Toronto and worked in BMO Nesbitt Burns was the brokerage,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more. I was in my mid 30s, but the program I got into was more for someone who was 23 or 24. Smiling and dialing 200 times a day and setting up appointments. So I had the confidence at that point. Met a person who was a programmer, and it would have been late. It would have been December 2009. Just got it. The good thing about financial business is everyone else's
Yeah.
business. So who's
Mm-hmm.
happy and making money, who's unhappy and making money, who's unhappy and not making money, and who's happy and not making money. So I wanted to focus on the happy and making money. So we started this internet marketing company, whatever the heck that meant. The internet was a lot
Yeah.
different back in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So we set up, eventually within a week or two, we came up with the concept of CFC. Took about 2 months to develop it on the back end, and we launched it on February 10th, 2010. So, so that was my first kind of, entrepreneurial play as far as just starting something from scratch, just a concept and an idea. And it's evolved. What I thought it was going to be in 2010 is not what it is right now.
It's funny,
Um,
Lee, you mentioned this, and I'd like to find out how the concept of it and the reasoning behind it started CFC, because I remember in high school, and a buddy of mine that I played high school football with, he made from his VHS, like we're talking, 93, 94, 95,
yep.
with his camcorder, and just taking a VHS and sending it to schools and hoping people would see him, besides what the coach might tell other people, and just
Yep.
so how did this start, the idea of CFC, and what are the benefits for people who become members?
Yeah, so there's two sides. I mean, we started it because there was a void in the marketplace, meaning there were some decent regional websites in Canada, but there was no, and there's some comparables in the United States. There was nothing that was comparable to some of the sites in the United States. So there was no national website
Mm-hmm.
where everyone could go to find out information on recruiting, to promote themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because the evolution of the VHS highlight film is now, it was at that time was the YouTube highlight film. Now there's a
Mm-hmm.
company called Huddle, HUDL, who's like sports specific and football. So that's where you put your highlights now. And what we enabled the players to do, even back in 2010 when we launched the site, was to upload their videos so that now scouts could see their videos. And there was one central place for the players to then promote themselves, whether it be with their video, or we would write an article on them or something like that, or we'd rank them eventually. And then the recruiters, so the university coaches, now had a central place to come,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be on it daily, many times a day, as because we'd have many kids per day uploading their videos. So initially when we started the site, we thought we could monetize it. Back in the day, if you thought you could monetize it with banner ads and stuff like that, but or just sell sponsorship. And we tried that, but it just wasn't sustainable, not something that could sustain a business. So we've zigged and zagged a few times, but that was the original concept. Was
Mm-hmm.
a site that was a central landing platform, if you will, that would have all the recruits players on it and all the recruiters on it, and then that's the value of it for the players. They can now promote themselves for free, and then the coaches can
So the
find those recruits.
so the players can go on, upload their own profile for free.
Correct. We've always had, they could do it for free. Now there's some enhanced, so it's a freemium model
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
there's some free attributes to the site,
Yeah.
and players can always promote themselves for free. Now, if they want to get more knowledge or they want to see the rankings and stuff like that, that's when they have to
Mm-hmm.
access it by
Mm-hmm.
a membership.
Mm-hmm.
But they could always, and we've never, it's never cost them to promote themselves. So initially it was just their prospect video with some information. Now we have more of an interactive player profile where they can go back and update it at any point in time. It has a lot more information. We did a big database improvement during COVID. We took advantage of this time, and about a nine month project that had just enhanced it. But it's always been free for kids to promote themselves.
What is some of the feedback that you're getting from some of the university coaches, even high school coaches, of the benefits of this, especially traveling. Like if you don't have to go to this little small town, this little small, which is still a nice thing to do, and it's good experience, and it
Yep.
shows your dedication to the player. But having this resource, especially as you said, all across Canada, must have many benefits.
Yeah. So like anything, I mean, the top recruits, everyone's going to know about them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So where our site has really helped, not that it hasn't helped those top recruits, but it really helps that situation that you just said. It could be that student athlete who's in a smaller town, doesn't get the exposure. They
Hmm.
can either promote themselves on our site or they come to our events. And sometimes our events are for those people, again, that don't maybe play in a highly competitive region, but they're good, and they just have to play against people of a higher competitive stature. So yeah, it definitely has. It's made it more accessible for kids, no matter what their geography is. So that's one thing we always wanted to do, and we're proud that we've been able to facilitate that.
What about for you personally? What is some satisfaction you're getting out of the results over the last 11 years? But what are some difficulties? What are some struggles that you're having that you know that you could probably overcome? It's just going to take some time.
Yeah. So I think the the satisfaction that I've gotten out of it, obviously, it's kind of like your own little Play-Doh. You get to, you're in control of what you're creating.
Hmm.
So I think from that standpoint, I've been satisfied with being able to be creative, being able to, you know, be a leader in the space, uh, and just we've always wanted to make something that's sustainable. We've seen for years and years people try to do similar stuff, but they just never had a business plan or a vision. Where we always had a long-term vision. That's why we're still around. We weren't there for looking at a year or two down the road. We were looking at many years down the road. So our vision has been important, and not that we haven't had to change what we're
Hmm.
doing and iterate many times, but just having a long-term vision. So from that standpoint, that's satisfying because we've done things that no one's ever been able to do. The TSN game was, it took 5 years of building relationships,
How does that
going,
work? Are you grabbing top recruits, putting them together? What does that look
yeah,
like? And probably
yes.
2019 to 2020 is kind of because of COVID puts a damper on things, but you guys are
Mhm.
continuing. Your plan is to continue this throughout.
Yeah, 2020, we still picked a roster. We still did
Hmm.
selection camps.
Hmm.
We could do them socially distanced, kind of like the NFL Combine, because a lot of it's just running and testing and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So we were still able to announce rosters this year. The first year that we had it, as I'm looking at the two teams. It worked out very, very well. It went beyond our expectations. One, because my staff did an outstanding job. That's probably the biggest thing. TSN was a good partner in such that they ran a professional, great broadcast like they would with any other. We had two great play-by-play and the color commentators, Farhan Lalji and Dwayne Ford, who took it seriously and knew the kids' names and did a really good job.
Well, you think
And
from the kid's perspective, this is huge. This is huge,
yeah,
right? So to
yeah,
take it seriously would, be a
yeah.
no-brainer because this is maybe some of the biggest games that these kids will ever play in.
Yeah, absolutely. For a lot of them, it's the only time they'll ever be on TSN. And I think until it was actually real and happened, people still didn't really understand what we're doing. And that's like anything in life until it actually happens. I always say it's fake until it's real. So yeah, once it happened, it kind of people were like, "Whoa, this is a big deal, and this is a quite a game changer."
Yeah.
So again, that's the satisfaction. Definitely that was a satisfying day,
Mhm.
seeing that event through, and it was really, the top of our mountain, kind of as
Mhm.
far as what we could do in events. That's going to always be our biggest event, and it's not something I don't think we could outdo on the event side of things for
Mhm.
sure. So yeah, so those are kind of the highlights as far as the satisfaction. And I think the challenge is like anything that's new is you have a lot of doubters,
Mm.
right? You have a lot of doubters, and you just have to be able to filter that stuff, because it's, again, it's
What
the
is the
comments.
biggest contention that you're getting from people in their doubts? What is probably the top thing that keeps popping up?
Well, I think that evolves over time, right? And it has evolved over time. So I think just people doubting the initial concept, that it would work, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that it was sustainable and something that's a long-term entity. The Canadian sports system is such that it's set up that sometimes being a private enterprise in the Canadian sports system is a challenge, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone thinks that it should be done publicly, if that makes sense. So I think sometimes, um, certain public associations think they should be doing what we're doing. That's maybe not necessarily what they should be doing. So, sometimes people just not knowing, just, again, monkey see, monkey do, right? They think, they look at those things, so, well, we should be doing that, not them, kind of thing. So
I
those are
would
some of the challenges.
I would think a challenge may be the American recruiters, and I have no idea how they work, being someone that was never recruited, but the idea that people coming up from the States and grabbing the best of the best, and then people may say, well, as you're saying, that it may not work because you're not dealing with the best. But I would say that you're dealing with some of the most intelligent athletes in North America, because they're not only athletic, but they're academically sound, or at least, as I think you and I experienced, we get on that track eventually because we're following that carrot and we're doing two of the same things together.
Yeah. Yeah, football's interesting in such that, in North America anyway, um, the reality is in the comparing in United States and Canada is very different than what the perception is. And what I mean by that, just because we have our university football and our professional league in Canada doesn't mean we're on par with the United States. There's still a huge gap. The analogy I like to use, it's like Canadian hockey and Hungarian hockey. There is that gap, but that doesn't mean there isn't some great players that can
Mm-hmm.
compete. They just have to get into the system and be
Mm-hmm.
able to compete. So, where sometimes, um, where we're open to all the opportunities that these
Mm-hmm.
players have. And sometimes you have people opposed to that too. It's like, anything, that if there's whatever country, if they're losing their athletes to another country, then those, potentially coaches in that country might see that as a bad thing. And sometimes we get pushback from that kind of stuff too. But again, because we're laser focused on the players, our vision is, all about player advocacy. So, from that standpoint, I think that, because we're so focused on player advocacy, that those things don't really distract us.
Is there a way, Lee, I'm thinking of like a Danny Frame or a Godfrey Ellis who came out of Acadia, who did not play football at all and then went off to the CFL. They're
Mm-hmm.
just athletes, natural born athletes. They worked on it. But is there a way for, say, CFC to dive into that pool as well? Like just getting some people who might be some good bodies that you can develop into great athletes? Or
Yeah, I
is
mean,
it difficult?
yeah, I think it's difficult for us because usually the players who come to our website are ones that are already in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And those are players you're talking about that are outside of the system. So
Mm-hmm.
usually what happens has to happen with those players. They have to be identified by someone, usually a coach or a friend who's playing the sport. I think with regards to Danny, if he was, growing up now, he would have played high school football, or
Mm,
because there's just more football in Nova Scotia as there was opposed to back then. Godfrey came from another country that didn't
mm-hmm.
have football. So, I mean, so from their circumstance, I think they kind of got into it when they did. It's just, football is unique in such that it has so many different athletes as far as their skill sets and their body sizes. So Those two specific examples are the bigger lineman type, which
Mm-hmm.
there just aren't as many of those people out there as opposed to the small guys like myself. So, I think it's all about opportunity. So I don't know if CFC has the opportunity to, necessarily. I think what we can do as maybe a second order consequences, again, making so much excitement around playing the sport that
Mm-hmm.
their
Attracts the people,
friends,
yeah.
or friends attract them, or they're just happen to see, oh wow, there's a prospect game on TSN in football. So again, it's just that kind of exposure to the game that I think we can, not just on our own, but we can help that part of it as far as exposing athletes to the game and hopefully getting them to play in a system somewhere.
That's what it takes too. You're walking down your high school hallway and you're like, that guy must be a football player. You're like,
Yeah.
you play football? No? Hey, we have a place for you, CFC for instance, but why don't you come join the football team? And that's how it works. A lot of
Yeah.
sports work that way. Lee, thinking
Correct.
of people getting into work and more of your profession, your job, and your experience, starting your lemonade stand, raffling, working as a dishwasher, starting
Yeah.
your career and work, and just dabbling in jobs, and then a couple of the jobs that you've changed into. Do you have any tips or advice for people who are getting into work one way or the other?
You're talking like for like a young 20-year-old, like
Young
someone in their
kids,
20s kind
young
of thing.
kids, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and for the young kid part, I think of parents who listen to this that can give some advice to the small children. Like, you're not too young to go start a lemonade stand. You're not too young to go to the local restaurant and start washing dishes. And
Yep.
also not to be afraid of for people who are not happy in their job, they don't see it going somewhere, so they switch careers.
Yep. Yeah, I think with the teenager or someone even in their early 20s, I think there's more opportunity to do their version of the lemonade stand. So there's so many side hustles you can do online now. So I think from that standpoint, and I do think the younger generation, therefore, because there's lots more opportunities, they are more entrepreneurial than maybe we were back in the day. Maybe not, but they have
Mm-hmm.
more opportunities, right? Where our side hustles when we were young were the lemonade stands,
Mm-hmm.
delivering newspapers and all that. That stuff, doesn't really exist. The lemonade stand could to a certain extent, but the
Mm-hmm.
delivering newspapers definitely doesn't. Um, so I think there's a lot more opportunity for them. And I just, the big thing is just do it, just don't make the mistake where you're getting yourself too leveraged or in debt, So, I would just say for someone who's before they're ending school is just start to dabble with things. You look at something like, sports cards, in the last year, the value of sports
They
cards has
are.
gone up, tripled. Right. So just, and it's partly that's because of COVID, but partly
Mm-hmm.
because the market's matured too. Right. And, so there's lots of things you can do. You can sell, fulfillment by Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of side hustles you can do. You can
Flipping,
just
yeah.
start a website and, you can do whatever, right? So I think I would just recommend someone having a side hustle as early as possible. That would be my first thing. And then, as they get through their education, I think a couple things. One is, there's so many distractions now for phones, etc. Obviously we've got the pandemic going on as well. So I think the first thing is they got to evaluate their own mental health from the standpoint that they're not getting pulled in too many directions. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the less distractions you have, the better sometimes. So I think just evaluating your mental health. I think everyone's more aware of mental health than we were when we were coming out. So
Mm-hmm.
I think evaluating that, because to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a strong constitution, because it's competitive. No one's going to care about you and how well you do,
Yeah.
and everyone's going to be, if you have a good idea, people are going to be copying you and stuff. So you got to have a really strong, sense of self. You got to have a strong, you know, so you have to. That would be my first actually thing. Just work on yourself, getting yourself better, but just limiting your distractions and that. But as far as getting into the workforce, I think the biggest thing is to do is start working.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
it sounds simple, but don't overthink it. I'll sit down with someone and they say, what should I take more school? And no,
Hmm.
get out there. I mean, yeah, get your whatever you think you need to get from an education standpoint. Then get out there, start working, because you need to learn how to work.
Hmm.
You need to learn how to work with people. You need to learn how to show value in products or services. You need to, just understand the whole work thing. So don't worry about where you're working. Don't worry about your title. Just get out there and start working, and then you'll figure things out. Things will figure itself out once you. And people talk about follow your passion. I don't know about that. Find something you're good at. Find something you're good at. Follow your passion. Just it's
Yeah.
easy for some rich guy to tell you to follow your passion.
you know,
Find something you're
just let
good
it
at.
all go. Go follow your
Find something
passion.
you're good
What
at.
are you talking
Figure
about?
out what you're good at, and make sure you're in in an industry that's on the uptake instead of on the downtake, and then surround yourself with good people. You
It's
know.
the idea too is find something you love to do.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds good,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't always love what we're doing, right? So we have to make that crystal clear, especially the passion and the love. Okay, it's good, but we really just got to get down to it and work.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll enjoy that. You'll enjoy the
Hmm.
process,
Yeah.
and you'll enjoy getting better. The biggest thing, you know, uh, continue to. You think the thing that's the fallacy is when you're done school, you're done your education, but you're always learning, right?
Hmm.
So I've learned more in this decade, in the last decade, than I learned when I was going through school. And
Hmm.
school gives you a nice base and framework, but again, it's very much idealistic, right? So you have to get out in the workforce to understand what the real how it really works. The idealism of an education gives you some frameworks, but they're not. You got to fill in the blanks. You got to fill in the gaps and learn how to work and learn how to, And if you're an entrepreneur, also sometimes if you follow the masses, I'm not sure you're an entrepreneur, because really
Hmm.
entrepreneurs are usually starting things that other people just couldn't see, because they're just seeing what everyone else in society sees. So it's not necessarily, if and you'll realize that by doing these side hustles. If entrepreneurialism is not for you, that's fine. There's a difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur. They're not necessarily the same people. Sometimes they could be, but a business owner could just be someone who bought a business and runs it well, but they not necessarily an entrepreneur who's creative and can start a business. So I think you just got to learn, what you're best suited at, what your best skills are. It's okay to be an employee, and it's okay to be an employer.
Hmm.
So it's just get out there and work and try a bunch of different things and have a good framework for your own mental health, and build your skills, because the more skills you have, the more stable your mental health should be, but
Hmm.
also just it'll open up your opportunities.
Lee, what about character? This person, whether the employer or employee, what about character that you have found is essential in the workplace?
Yeah, I think you know
Character
it.
trait, I should say.
Yeah, I think biggest thing is I think if you're kind of have an entrepreneurial mindset, it's obviously you could start your own business, but you could work within a company that's maybe more entrepreneurial. It gives you some chance to be an entrepreneur. And if you're not, if you don't have those frameworks, then a corporate life is fine, right? And where it's very regimented and you kind of know the pecking order and how you're going to get to the next level. So as far as character traits, I think everyone has to be a hard worker is I think that's an obvious one, right? I don't think there's no matter what you do, you want to be a hard worker, but I think the biggest thing is just having a curiosity and continually learning, especially if you're an entrepreneur, right? But I think that would be helpful no matter what you're doing.
As we get older and looking back, as you said earlier, and you had mentioned that you've received your master's degree as well, a couple of bachelor's degree. How do you value, and knowing our bodies, how do you value education and exercise throughout our lives?
Yeah, I think exercise and nutrition are underrated as far as being able to achieve, your peak performance no matter what you're doing. And as you get older, you'll be forced to recognize those things. You maybe don't recognize them when you're younger because your body just bounces back much quicker. But I work out more religiously now than I did 10, 15 years
Mhm.
ago. I eat much better now than I did 10, 15 years ago because I need that energy to perform at peak performance, and I want to perform at peak performance every day, and I enjoy being a peak performer every day. So as far as just the exercise and nutrition, it's
What do you
it's
do,
key.
Lee? What do you do nowadays for exercise?
Now I would three main things that I do. I don't do any sports or anything dynamic. Just my body just is that was more for my 20s and teen
But,
years.
but don't
Just
you miss strapping on the helmet?
I don't miss strapping on the helmet, no, but
No, no?
I miss the competitiveness of
Yeah.
sports for sure. The helmet, I was, being a guy who's not a big guy, and you were talking about big guys. I took him enough hits.
Hmm.
I do miss, I miss playing squash,
Yes.
and that kind of stuff. Just being competitive, which I
Hmm.
did play a little bit of squash after my football career, but
Hmm.
I miss the competitiveness of sports and the
Yeah,
camaraderie of sports. Those
absolutely.
are the two things I miss. But as far as what I do now is pretty static stuff. As far as I 2 to 3 times a week, I'll get in the gym and lift weights.
Hmm.
2 to 3 times a week, I'll do some swimming, lap swimming, do some laps, and to get my cardio because that's just easier on the body.
Yeah.
And then ebbs and flows how much, but I try to do some yoga to do the stretching part of it. So those are the three main things that I'll do. Get out walking too, depending on time of year. If it's colder out, I might not do as much in the winter, but get out walking here and there, do some hiking and stuff like that. Those would be my main exercise regimens.
You mentioned education and how important that is. Is there any other, because I find even with the idea of passion and love, some people say, well, university's not necessary. Just go out and do what that entrepreneurial, go get it and blaze the world. But
Yep.
do you have advice on that about education, whether formal or informal for people? As you said, it's lifelong learning, but mentioning the skills that people have and how they can develop them.
Yeah, so I think there's formal and informal. I'll talk about the informal first. I think, even the last, I've taken advantage. I've called this my once in a lifetime sabbatical with COVID. So I've
Yeah.
taken some courses from Wharton. I've taken Scott Galloway, Professor Scott Galloway has a course I took that was great. I've
Great
read,
guy, actually. Yeah.
yeah, he's definitely someone I follow and listen to on his podcast, etc. And then done a bunch of reading, a bunch of books, business books, and some enjoyment, but mostly just a lot of business books.
Hmm.
I try to come up with like uh, a mentor board of directors, so like a Warren Buffett or a Charlie Munger or Scott Galloway. Just
That's a great idea and
read
a good
read
way to
what
look
those
at it too.
people. Yeah, I didn't come up with the idea. I'm sure someone else did, but
Hmm.
I liked it.
Mentor
And
board of directors. Yeah.
yeah, so just people that you admire and are successful, whatever your definition of success is, and really try to consume all that they've put out there, whether it be written books or I'll watch old Berkshire Hathaway, their general meeting. I'll watch all
Hmm.
those, and just the nuggets in there you learn are tremendous. So. I think that's learning is key. I think, and it comes with the podcasts.
Hmm.
I'm looking at getting into a new business venture, so I've just been consuming all these podcasts, making notes, and so there's different forms of learning, whether it be audio, visual, or text that you can. And part of the learning is learning how you consume and how you learn things. So whatever is best format for you, I think is great. as far as the formal education, I think the big thing with that, it depends, formal education gives you the ability to, you know, basically, I guess develop pathway for a career.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you get beyond high school, really you take a post-secondary education, whether it's college or university, to enable yourself to get a pathway into a career. So therefore it's necessary to have certain degrees. Do I think that someone with a degree XYZ is better than someone with degree ABC or someone without? Not necessarily, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't make the rules.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So if it's just society thinks that you need a certain education standard, and depending on the country you're in, right? And degrees do allow people to, depending on their current socioeconomic status, to get to a higher one. So
Mm-hmm.
it's and as far as, within a degree itself, you're going to have good teachers and teachers you like, teachers you don't like, and classes you gravitate towards and classes you don't. And it's going to be different for different people, right? So one teacher that you like, someone else won't like. That's just how it works, right? So I think the big thing is looking at it as a pathway to get you somewhere.
What about your goal, Lee, whether it's for CFC or a career goal? I know you have some other irons in the fire as well. What is your overarching goal?
Yeah, I think for my businesses to that they're sustainable, which means at some point I have to exit them, right? I think when you create a business, you create it to sell it, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily because that's the strategy you're looking to employ, but
Mm-hmm.
if you don't sell it, it's going to die, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to exist. So I think from those standpoints, I have to make those companies able to survive without me, and I owe that to, I think the the value, the proposition that the business has now. I think I owe it to the current employees,
Mm-hmm.
so that it is sustainable. Hopefully I live for many, many more years. But if you get hit by, the old hit by a bus adage, and hopefully that those can go on. And so I want to set them up. It's kind of like someone raising a child, right? At some point, they're going to leave the house. So it's the same thing with these businesses. So I want to set them up that they're sustainable, and can operate without me. So those are the big things I'm looking at now. So we're developing some
Mm-hmm.
learning management systems within CFC to really ensure those things that, again, they can operate without me. Because again, I have such a great staff that I don't do a lot of day-to-day stuff within CFC. I'm more just, big picture, kind of look at what's next thing around the corner. So I think those are the big things with those businesses, is to make them, to be able to exist without me.
What about you? What do people maybe they don't understand about you? And if they understood this, they can get a better appreciation of the work that you're bringing to the table.
Oof. That's yeah. So I think you stumped me there.
Who is Lee? Who is Lee that they don't know?
Yeah, I guess um, focused and motivated
Yeah.
to deliver some value where there didn't exist before. And with both of the businesses that I created, I can say that, there was nothing like a CFC, and we've made a difference in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of and potentially thousands of families over the course of 11 years. So that really motivates me. And then, with regards to the Football North, the newest of the ventures,
Mm-hmm.
we're changing kids' lives as far as, kids getting an education paid for because they're proficient in the academics where they're eligible to get into the school or the program, but they're proficient in a sport that really, again, helps them, get to another level. And now, depending on, again, the socioeconomic circumstances. But if you're going to the United States and you had to pay that out of pocket, you were talking $250,000 American for some of these schools over the course of time, and they're getting those educations obviously for free because of the athletic scholarship. So those things motivate me is really adding that value, but it really making a difference in a young, and with these, obviously it's young men, but making a difference in these young men's lives because, I, I think it, is good for society at the end of the day.
I think you won't say it because it's a sign of it, of humility as well. Because you said you're not that big and that's physical, but I think on a more intellectual, emotional level, you're hanging out with some pretty big guys. So your partner, Larry Justanis, you're a contributor to TSN, you're the CEO of a company. So some humility as well that you bring to the table, which I think is most valuable when dealing with anyone. What about for you, Lee? Is there any adversity that you have faced in your life that adversely, positively or negatively affects your work, but also using that as an encouragement to other people who are facing adversity in their work?
Yeah, I think there's different degrees for sure, and I think everyone experiences it. I think it's just the challenges of just figuring out your path and figuring out what you're good at and figuring out you know when you're entrepreneurial and you're looking and you like kind of leading the charge. We're educated to be in this formalized corporate system, either public or privately, but we're not educated necessarily to be entrepreneurs or encouraged to be entrepreneurs. So it's more difficult to figure that out.
Mm.
So I think from that standpoint, the first 2 years, CFC was funded on my credit card. So I mean, when someone because of that base and because of that struggle, it makes everything else a little more sweeter, right? Because
Mm.
people see the end product, but they didn't see the beginning product, and so it grounds me, but it also, you know, if you get any negative feedback that's unwarranted, then it just really doesn't bother you because you know where you've been, and so I think it gives you a good perspective. So I think from that standpoint, and obviously, COVID, both my businesses are affected from COVID because both of them are non-essential.
Mm.
At the end of the day, sports is non-essential, and especially for,
Whoever's defining it, I would say it's
yeah,
essential to
yeah,
work.
I think it's essential to, uh, as far as the betterment of specifically the participants,
Yeah.
their physical and mental health, and long term, it will help them. But within the definition of a pandemic, it's deemed as unnecessary, and of course, understand why. So, I think all the adversity that I've gone through in other parts of my life prepared me for this. And there's been no business course that I took that ever mentioned the word pandemic. So there was nothing that prepared me for a pandemic. What prepared me were the challenges and the adversity that you spoke about, and having a good support system, a good partner that supports me. So I think from that standpoint, this is part of that adversity. But again, we looked at it from a whole different standpoint. We took advantage of this. We developed a
Mm.
database that is now second to none, better than our American competitors. And we did it. We're creatively through a co-op program at an MBA student who had the skills to develop it. So we took advantage of it. So don't never felt sorry for ourselves 1 second, right? So we said, all right, perfect time to get some projects done that were probably on the back burner that we should have been doing. So we didn't lay off any employees. Everyone was, paid full wage, and we just moved on. Our revenue wasn't full, but we knew it would just be a temporary thing, and we know when we come out of this, we'll be in much better shape. And so again, didn't feel sorry for ourselves one second. Frustrated here and there, absolutely, and when you don't have sport being played, that really drives your businesses. However, just put our head down and try to get better.
You should have that as your tagline. CFC started on my credit card. So we're here for you.
That's right. That's right.
Is there anything that we haven't touched upon, Lee, that maybe we've missed? Any ideas for student athletes coming up, looking at to be placed somewhere? Any sort of advice or suggestions for them, or even
Yeah, I think
coaches? Yeah.
I think when it comes to the student athlete, I think it's, do your homework, educate yourself on the sport, surround yourself with good people, which is difficult. Definitely, if you don't understand the sport, it's difficult to do that sometimes, because you'll get opportunists that will lurk around, and not always they're the best advisor. And parents, be supportive, but don't be protective of their kids. And what I mean by that is support them in their education or sports ventures, but it's their venture, not yours. So as a parent, just be supportive. Be there to help them through the good and bad times, but remember, it's not them playing, and give them their space to fail and succeed. I think that's important, so that helps them in their future, because I know that was given, that available, that space was given to me, and I'm better for it. If that space wasn't given to me, then I wouldn't be as good for it. So parents, give your kids some space, let them succeed and fail, and let them get out there and do it on their own. And so I think that's important. And then, so I think from, and then just, if someone's getting into the workforce, just start working, figure it out. Just start working. Don't overthink things. Don't make things too complicated. Just get out there and start working and find out what you're good at, and keep learning.
Lee, how can they reach you, or what are some of the businesses that they can contact to get more information?
Yeah, so the business is CanadaFootballChat.com. You can visit that. Footballnorth.ca. If you want to contact me, info@CanadaFootballChat.com will eventually get to me. So you can definitely, people can use that. My staff will get it to me. But yeah, visit those websites, check them out, and feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. I'm on LinkedIn, Lee Barrett, Barette. So love to hear from someone.
Lee, one final question, and that is, why do you work?
I enjoy it. It gives you purpose, and I love. I just like creating a business that gets better every day. So I enjoy getting better every day, and I enjoy working to get better every day, and I enjoy a business that gets better every day.
Lee Barrett, CEO and publisher of Canada Football Chat, CFC. I appreciate the time that you've given me, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I've enjoyed it.
I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Please comment, share, like, tell people about this podcast. You can also find me on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, any sort of podcast hosts. My podcast comes from Sounder FM. I would really appreciate it. It's important to me. Hopefully you get something out of this. And I jokingly say it it justifies me being behind this microphone to my dear wife. So it's not pressure, but it really would be nice. So please like, share, subscribe, and follow me on any sort of social media. Thank you. This is Brian V with Why We Work.